It's on. It's red lighting, Brendan. So we're a little late today. It's a little bit after 10 after 7. We'll start this facilities committee meeting. And first, I'd like to have approval of the September 26th and October 24th meeting minutes.
Motion?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? No. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, those are passed, thank you. I see Doc Farris is in the audience, and if you would indulge me for just a moment, is there anything other than the proof that you sent over? Now that it's got the correct spelling, are you good with that?
Yes.
Okay.
Was
did
it
you-
correct? The spelling was corrected.
I know, that's what I meant, now that the spelling's correct too. It's just a small plaque. I forget what the size was off the top of my
12 by
head.
24.
Thank you. I knew it wasn't huge, so.
I had a question when.
Yeah, sure.
Was Dr. Pershing superintendent from start here? Was he at a previous role or when he came in as superintendent?
He came in as a superintendent.
Okay. All right. We didn't.
In 1973.
Right. We didn't know exactly if he had a previous role or if he came in as superintendent.
No,
And those are accurate dates? The
Yes.
73 to
93.
Okay.
Okay. Do we need to,
And the dedication, was the intention on the outside of the door?
Well, I guess on the wall, the door of the wall,
As you enter.
here's a copy.
oh, okay, great. I totally forgot. My printer's not.
That's my only one now. Don't-
Yeah.
Just send it to me. I guess you do.
So,
All right,
yeah,
that's
as you
my
see it,
bad.
it says dedicated to, so is it the room dedicated to? I just want to, I don't mean literal, but I want to make sure that we get it right.
Yep.
It's the wrestling room, right?
Yes.
Auxiliary gym.
Wrestling.
Yeah.
The auxiliary wrestling.
Oh, we
Wrestling.
don't let it go.
I don't know,
Is that what
officially
you're
the auxiliary gym?
I can't.
Yeah.
But it's auxiliary, not the wrestling.
Right after you walk in the door to the right there.
Yeah, down the
Yes.
hallway then.
Yes.
Okay,
Oh, I know what you're
okay. So, should we send it forward to the full board? Can we put it on the agenda?
Sure.
Yep.
If we're agreeable? You're both agreeable
Yes,
to that?
yes.
Okay, me too. Okay. All right, I'll give this back. I'm already up here. There you go.
Dr.
Yeah,
Saris, do you
you're
have any
very
idea how much it weighs and how it mounts? Just curious. Like, is it, I'm assuming it's heavy, right? It's 2 feet by 1 foot?
They give everything that tanks are with, it's all.
Oh, they do, okay. They give them mounting hardware and everything?
Yeah, that's what it says here.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. So we'll bring that then to the full board. I'll print out a copy of it then so I can show it.
Probably update.
Okay.
They'll know about it ahead
Yeah,
of
we
time.
can-
Perfect. That would be great. Okay. All right, well, thanks, Doc. I appreciate that. So now I'd like to move on to our old business, which is facilities feasibility study update. Mike from KCBA.
Thank you.
I will
Thank you.
turn it over to you. Thank you for coming.
For all having me again this evening. This was kind of session number 2 from our meeting last month. We threw a lot of information at you, a lot of existing conditions. So again, tonight we want to kind of surmise that quickly, but start to talk about priorities and what's next. Start to talk a little bit about the 10-year plan, what things would be included in that, where our focuses should lie as we're getting ready to turn the calendar over to 2023. So as I said, we'll do a very brief review. We'll talk about the elementary school buildings and options, the high school building and options, and then the high school campus and some options. Review the findings of the enrollment study, and as I mentioned, talk about the 10-year plan. Just last week, we got our report, or the beginning of the report from the wastewater treatment plant report, which is, again, more terrific reading. The highlights there are that there aren't any major highlights. There's nothing big. There's nothing major. There's continual maintenance, which is no small task, but there isn't any red lights or alarms that are going off there as far as the
Literally.
existing conditions. Yeah, really. There's all kinds of euphemisms you can use when you're talking about wastewater management. Nothing's hitting the fan. So.
There you go.
There you go. So we do need to meet with, have a call with the kitchen consultant as well. We were trying to do that last week and ran out of time with the holiday. So we're kind of in wrap-up mode, and then again, that longer report will be heading your way in the next few weeks. So diving into kind of what we're talking about, another maybe a few new people, but we are going to go kind of quickly because we want to jump into the reports, or to some of the options. Our study is always about two things: educational and operational needs of buildings. Where we are architects and looking at roofs and windows and walls and things about the operational side of the buildings, but as educational experts as well, we're very much focused on the function that's going on inside these buildings. They need to function as schools, let alone be proper buildings as well. So topics that we talked about before, existing conditions, individual building assessments. We looked at athletics, and we're starting to provide some recommendations tonight. The focus has been on all 6 buildings, which includes this building here, the 2 elementaries, the 4-5 center, the brand new middle school, and the high school. Some of the goals: analyze the existing building, provide some recommendations for maintenance, but also long-term plan. There was some emphasis brought to us for STEAM curriculum. That's STEM with an A. The A is arts. So to kind of increase and improve some of the terrific curriculum that you already offer, especially in your primary schools. And then, as I mentioned, prioritize future initiatives. Look at infrastructure improvements, student and faculty safety, and traffic improvements, certainly at the middle school and high school campus. 21st century education, this is kind of, again, another little boilerplate piece about how the workforce has changed. That's why teaching has changed, and that's why our buildings need to be a bit more adaptable. We're not working like this, we're not educating like this anymore. Our spaces look much more like this, much more collaborative, much more open for not only teacher instruction, but for individual work and student collaboration. So, diving into building assessments and suggested modifications. Our first impressions, again, you're really starting from a great foundation. And I don't say that lightly. Not every district we work with has really nice buildings. You have very great buildings. They're very well maintained. From the middle school, which is obviously very, very new, all the way through the 4-5 center, there are great attributes of all those buildings. They're very well maintained. Like anybody's house, you have always got the next project. And like any building that's 20, 30, or 50 years old, there's some things to work on. And that's kind of what the facilities part of the study will mention. The existing school capacities are more than adequate. In fact, you've got some room in the elementary schools and the 4-5 center. The reason for that is the creation of the new middle school a few years ago. Obviously, several years ago, you had capacity issues. Providing that building, moving 3 grades out of what was essentially the primary schools to create that new facility really lent you now to some tremendous opportunities because you have a little bit of room. Again, the middle school is in great condition, as you would hope. The high school and the campus have really the most needs of all your facilities, but also the most potential for improvements there. Part of our study, we've broken down kind of a scorecard of all of your buildings, from kind of ideal to more of a poor condition based on a number of topics. The way those buildings kind of ranked out, the elementary schools, even the 4-5 center, have some work to do. The high school had the highest grade, so this is kind of like golf, you want a low score. Based on the size of the building and the square foot per student, you see things like the 4-5 center has a large square foot per student. That is a very big building for 481 students. You essentially, between Hereford, Marlborough, and the 4-5 center, that's equal amounts of kids, 480, 440, 480 again. And you can see the 4-5 center has a lot of space. So we'll kind of keep that in mind as we go. We did take a look at the high school kind of before the Giza projects that you were working on. That score would have been much higher. That would have probably brought that into more of a poor or a critical need. But you've addressed those critical needs over the last summer or two. And so that's again leads that high school into a much better position. If you kind of break down those scores individually between site, exterior, interior, and MEP, which is mechanical, electrical, plumbing, again, the mechanical plumbing number for the high school is much lower than it would be without the GIZA projects. The highest thing of all of this list is interior needs at the high school. What you're looking at there are code compliant issues, a lot of educational concerns, some things about providing larger spaces for science and art and music, as well as just kind of finishes and lighting, things like that inside the high school. Anybody that's walked through there, as opposed to walking through the middle school, it's an older building. It's been a while since some of those areas have been refreshed. So, quickly, Hereford Elementary School, built in '57, but there has been some work over time. And the building, kind of as a summary, again, in very good shape. Some of the things that we recommended was creating some learning centers. We're going to talk about that in a moment, about creating some areas that aren't just a classroom space for students. Maybe providing a little bit of a cheerier environment. Again, this was a building that was a middle school, so there are still lockers, orange colored wallpaper and things like that in the hallway. So just kind of that older 70s middle school feel maybe wants to be revitalized. Things on the infrastructure side, which is a little bit more of the things to fix, mechanical, electrical, plumbing. Things like replacing some exterior doors, maybe providing some electronic access. There's older switchgear, which is electrical panels in the 1975 portion of the building, and things like that to kind of look to budget for in the future. So as we look at the floor plan and some of the potential ideas, what you see here is in yellow are all the primary educational use. That's basically full-time classroom. Anything in green is being used as either special education or essentially pull-out, like art, music, library, the gym, cafeteria, things like that. You do have a few in gray that are essentially unused classrooms, in this case 4. They're using them for storage, they're kind of using them for some specialists and things like that. But we kind of saw this, 5. We kind of saw that as potential areas for what we were calling kind of learning centers and things. So if we start to look at the K-4 model in the school, and one of the other things you notice quickly as well is you have some of those classrooms internal, meaning they don't have any natural light, no access to windows. Those aren't the first choices for teachers to want to teach in. So if we just highlight here the classrooms in yellow around the outside, that's an adequate amount for 6 classrooms per grade, as well as some of the learning support needs that you may have there. You can see that here, kindergarten, first grade, each kind of has their own area, so you can kind of graduate from the kindergarten wing into the first grade wing. And then potentially create learning centers within the middle portions of the school. So areas that aren't getting natural light, maybe we purposely open them into a little bit larger spaces. You could create some learning support classrooms around that exterior light as well. So we have all of our special education classrooms in existing spaces on the perimeter, so they're providing natural light. And again, we haven't really done anything here. We just kind of threw everybody out and brought everybody back in where they could maybe more aptly be used in classrooms that could be better used. We talked a little bit about maybe a fence around the play area here. That's a little bit of one of our security suggestions to the school as well. Again, kind of a project or something that could be done easily over a summer. Things like that. This proposed gate here in this lower area here as well. One of the things we look at security-wise is anytime you have nooks and crannies in a building, anytime you have an area that somebody could walk up, get inside or in between classrooms, try to close that off with a gate. There's a lot of parking down in that lower area, so if I don't know where I'm going and I park there, I might start looking at doors, and then we've heard that that's happening. People up here knocking on doors, hey, can I get in? No, you have to go over here. This is where the secure entrance is. So gates, fences, signage, things like that around the campus or around the site can certainly bring people back to what's the front door here and a secure entrance where the admin space is. So what are these learning centers we're talking about? Things like this, where you may not have classrooms that are all glass, but you do have spaces out in front of that that have areas where students and teachers can come out outside of the classroom. Supervised areas, they are still little kids, but supervised areas where you could open up a wall, or you could open up part of a classroom and spill out into the hallway. Let me get other images there. That could be an area for softer furniture. You see whiteboards here. You've seen them where there's televisions and sinks and projects and Lego walls, and that's kind of where all the, we'll say, the mess is, and purposely the mess. They're kind of fun, activated spaces. Classrooms are only they're never big enough. There's never enough storage for teachers. So if you start to have areas where, we've heard teachers say once, I'll go there, but I'm not bringing all my stuff. So if there's paper and pens and scissors and things there in these learning centers, then I'll bring all the students there. Then we can work on those types of projects and things. So kind of jumping back here, we saw this as a possibility for, again, just kind of reallocating these classrooms for kindergarten, support spaces, and then possibly taking, it could be just one wall out to create open spaces in the middle of the school, better utilize some of those empty classrooms for some different types of teaching, a little bit more of a modern setting for the school. So suddenly, now this school that's 40, 50 years old is completely refreshed, some modern pieces, and all we did was kind of, move a few classrooms around and take down a few walls. Similar study and similar ideas at Marlboro, a newer building built in '91, and as new as I want 1991 to be, that's still 30 years ago.
36.
So the things that are there to replace are the typical things that you would replace 30 years later. Things like mechanical, electrical, plumbing. The original boilers are still there. So it's just time for the mechanical stuff to move on. Most of those things last 20 to 25 years. You've gotten 30 years out of them. That just, again, shows good maintenance. But with working with Doug and planning for what you may be budgeting for in the future, boilers at Marlboro is coming up. So that's something that we had listed in the next 5 years to look at. Exterior doors there. There's some doors that were closing, but not closing all the way. And some of that was a product of the aluminum expanding over time. There was some heaving in some of the frames and the sills. So there's several areas that we walked through and the teachers were showing. You open a door to leave. When that door closes, it doesn't close all the way. So that is something that could be considered a summer, and we would recommend that coming up later as maybe something for this coming summer because it's a security issue. Just going around and looking at replacing those exterior doors. Two-story building here. Again, anything in green is currently used for learning support. Anything in yellow is a full-time classroom. Here we only really have 3 spaces that we were calling unused or underutilized. There's kind of 2 classrooms there on the second floor. You do have the before and after care group that is using kind of a full-time classroom there, which could be reused, or if that function was someplace else. But one of the ideas here, again, was a very similar exercise of clustering each class or each grade together, K1 on the first floor, learning support in between that, and then creating right along these kind of corridor areas here. There's an area where you just take the classroom, you take these 2 walls out, and now all of a sudden we have those open spaces. So we have an open space for, in this case, these 5 classrooms to congregate around. Same thing with first grade. Maybe there's just one on the floor and it's shared by both grades. But again, a very sound building. The bones are in great shape. The flight, which is kind of your STEM program now, is in 1 classroom. Maybe that expands and goes to 2. So again, without building additions and doing huge major renovations of things, the recommendations for both of these buildings is update a few things that are just coming due to be updated, and look at the possibility of some of these modernizations of public spaces in the school. So again, second floor, second and third grade, learning support in between, and these learning commons spaces kind of clustered again between all the grades. 4-5 Center, a little bit more to talk about here. This is a larger building, built in 1948, and then worked on in the 70s, and the 80s, and 09, and 19. So it's been worked on and expanded quite a bit over time. Again, we kind of found some old Facebook posts where it talked about.
That's where I took Kovac and that cottage there in the lower right, just let you know.
Yeah?
That's right. My dad graduated from that high school in the upper left.
Yeah, that's one of the models that's out in the yard.
Old name.
So it's great. There's a lot of great history to it. And again, older buildings transferring into other types of schools happens all over the place. There are things that, just like the Ford 5 Center, just like Hereford, that used to be a middle school, that's why there's lockers there. That's why the gym's a little larger, but that's a great thing. So here you've got a building that is a little bigger than it needs to be, certainly for the amount of students that are here. So if we look at, we'll start on the right, the infrastructure piece to that. There's some, I'll show in a moment about the kind of securing the courtyard. There's some domestic hot water heaters there that should be replaced, kind of just like the boilers in Hereford. You've recently put money into that building to restore the roof and some other areas there. So the building is being maintained. Of the three, it probably needs the most work, but the bones are in good shape. And with a little more TLC, that building could be in the same condition as any of the other elementary schools. Fire alarm systems, PA systems as public address announcements and things, and some ADA issues, again, just as an older building. Academically, on the educational side, the recommendations, again, similar to the others. Learning centers, expand those spaces for your flight program, and consider some, maybe an outside partner to occupy some of the unused portions of the school. So when we start to talk about some recommendations here, we look at that courtyard space, which is great, has a lot of potential. One of the things, again, when you talk about nooks and crannies, it's a big nook that goes inside here. In fact, there's dumpsters that are within that as well. So that was a security issue that we brought up and said, hey, maybe we want to keep those dumpsters outside of that courtyard, maybe along this back road or someplace further away from certainly where students are. With the kitchen sitting there, maybe the dumpsters want to be located down in this lower parking lot area. That was one location idea. Another could certainly be over by this area here if you decided to gate off that area. Again, kind of a simple gate that just provides that perimeter. We have some cameras or something here. If anybody's jumping over gates, you say, hey, there's an intruder, we're going to a lockdown, you're not supposed to be jumping over gates. Right now, it's pretty easy for somebody to kind of meander in and things. So just looking at some opportunities there to maybe move the dumpsters and create a little bit more of a secure courtyard. So 481 students, again, about the same that you have in the other schools. Here we have 13 rooms that we kind of identified as unused or underutilized. It's a much bigger class, it's a much bigger school. So using 44 classrooms, that's about what you're using in some of the other buildings. It's just, 21 classrooms used for 4th and 5th grade, that's about what you're using everywhere else. It's just that the other schools have 23 classrooms or 24, this has significantly more. So if we look at existing spaces here, right now you're kind of utilizing all of that space in yellow. We identified this space here, about 13,000 square feet, that could be used as rentable space. It has the locker rooms, 2 science labs here, and possibly a gym. So this is a space that has its own parking lot to the side. Could very easily be turned into a preschool center, a community center, or some other component to it. Again, it's fine the way it is, but you don't need high school size locker rooms for an elementary school. The gym is great. You don't necessarily need an auxiliary gym or other types of science labs and things like that. So a pre-K center, the after-school program, other things like that could certainly be thought of here as well. Private parking, private entrance, even as kind of a secure play area maybe in that courtyard, and then create the other area as a learning area. We're starting to see this quite a bit in elementary schools where you just have some turf, like you'd have in a sports stadium. Maybe not to that level, you're not with all the little black dots and stuff. But here you could easily create, when it's secured up, an area in here to bring students out throughout the day. A hardscape area, an area that would drain very easily after a rainstorm, and a great place for outdoor learning. Get kids outside. If COVID taught us anything, it's kind of nice to get outside every once in a while. These are, as a 4 or 5 center, still elementary school students, so they still want to get outside and play. And certainly if we can have some learning opportunities in a secure area, that could be a great potential as well. So get rid of the dumpsters and maybe bring in some more of a learning area. We thought maybe rearranging the parking area over on that side could be something to think about, and then maybe that loading area is actually created right next to the kitchen area here. So while we have kind of administrative and visitor parking here with the sidewalk that brings us to the front of the school, certainly could reconfigure that a little bit, maybe parking along the side, and still come up that same walkway. This is a little bit more secure there for dumpsters and loading and things like that. That's right next to the kitchen. So that's just kind of some outdoor ideas and a few suggestions there. Inside the building, if we look at, again, yellow being kind of our primary classroom space, but here there's a lot of area in the middle of the building where there's windowless classrooms. So if we look at the amount of classrooms that are unused currently, and we start to think about maybe blowing up these areas a lot bigger, they're 4th and 5th grade, maybe they could have a few more opportunities. Oops, why did that turn out? For project-based learning, here we go. Didn't like our idea.
Disappeared.
Let's go back. So here to here, yep. So if we blow that up a little bit and start to look at an area here, if we needed 11 classrooms per grade, this would be 11 classrooms, primarily around the exterior. There's one that's still interior there. We could still have an enclosed flight area, so your STEM spaces, science spaces and things like that are still within a enclosed room, maybe with a little transparency. And then we've got that larger open space outside of all of these classrooms as well. So now we've moved all of our primary classrooms, 10 of 11, to the perimeter for natural light, and kind of redevelop the interior part of the school here. The kitchen, the cafeteria, all of those things stay. Art could take over some old science rooms, expand that again because you have the space, so let's use it. Then we can come back and talk about what we do in the courtyard space. You go to the upper floor, and this essentially lays out very similar here. We'd have 11 of 11 around the outside, some learning spaces here, flight learning center for 5th grade, let's say, 4th grade's downstairs, 5th grade's upstairs. Maintain the library, maybe utilize some additional classroom space in here for learning support. Special needs students and students like that could be brought to the school as well. One of the things to think about as we started looking at these things and understanding that this building capacity-wise is essentially the same as the other 2 elementary schools. While you have K-3 in 2 schools and you have one that's 4 or 5, doing any of these wouldn't preclude you from creating 3 equal K-5 elementary schools. It's the same amount of students. It would obviously be some redistricting. You would have students stay in their home school for 6 years. Not to say there's anything wrong with a 4 or 5 center, but having that stability for those 6 years, as kids are starting out, they're doubling in size, they're used to that space a little bit more longer without having to move at all. So any of these suggestions at any of these schools could certainly lend themselves to stay at that K-3 model and a 4 or 5 center model, or, not to say you could do that overnight, but with some districting and recreating kind of 3 elementary schools, that could certainly happen. None of these suggestions would preclude the cost of that. Renovation costs would be essentially the same. We'd still be making the same amount of classrooms, basically, in each space. So all of these things would work well. So here we're kind of showing that model. Kindergarten on its own, essentially taking over the old science rooms because they're a little larger. They already have plumbing, so we could usually have toilets there. And then 1st grade, 2nd, 3rd, 4th. 4th and 5th would be in the lower level. Here we'd have 1st through 3rd. So again, the building could transition very easily to a K-5 building if you so chose. So kind of looking at those existing buildings, they're all at about 70% capacity. The 4-5 center at about 57. You want to be around 85. What that means is you've got class sizes at about 22 kids per class. Provides a little bit of flexibility for bubble years if you're growing or shrinking a little bit. You're not trying to aim for 100% capacity because then you have no place to go. So there's room in all three buildings, again, primarily because of the high school project. There's a few rooms there to maybe rent out in the 4-5 center. So, things to consider. Just talking elementary school. Possibly renovate the 4-5 center to provide some of the things that we had mentioned there. We did look at options of closing that building. So if we closed it, what would that mean? Could we fit 4th and 5th back into the elementary schools? If we closed it, do we have to expand the middle school? And if we closed it, is there an option for a new elementary school? As we said before, there are options and there are recommendations. These are options. We're not recommending these just yet. But it's always good to review as many options as you can. That way you can kind of come back and say, oh yeah, we looked at that, that didn't really work out. So, pros and cons of renovating the 4-5 center. As I said, it could be a 4-5 center or a K-5 room. There's plenty of room for all of the things that we need. Larger spaces equal more options. Again, it's not a bad thing to have a little bit of extra space. And it doesn't impact any of the kind of existing schools by renovating that space. The cons of expanding that, it is an older building, so there's going to be a few more things to fix, and the more you fix, the more it costs. And the current common spaces are a little larger than what we would see in some of the other elementary schools. So if we start closing buildings, you cannot fit 4th and 5th into these two schools without expanding them in one way or another. So at Marlboro, you have a 2-story building. There would be an addition on one side. Hereford here, we were suggesting you take out the circle entrance and maybe come back with more of a rectilinear building. It might be a little easier. But in either case, we need to add classrooms. So that's one of the cons. You're taking out a building and you're forcing yourself into larger additions. Basically the same thing as if you were just moving 4th grade in, you would still need to add capacity. Here we're showing maybe a smaller addition at Marlboro. You'd have some sort of redistricting a little bit to maybe do an addition at one elementary and not the other. But you would still need to do at least one of the elementary schools and an addition at the middle school. Middle school's a great building. Again, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And bringing 5th grade here is going to bring more traffic to that site as well. So a couple of things to think about under the pros and under the cons.
You got your flags right now?
And again, an option. Nothing we're showing.
December, January.
But just to show that we looked, there is plenty of space at this site for a new school building. You would build a new elementary school for 500 kids, and again, that school could be a K-5 or it could be a new 4-5 center in lieu of renovating the existing 4-5 center. We think that building has, again, a little bit more space than you need, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Certainly building a brand new building would be the most expensive of those 4 options, but it's something to look at. You certainly have enough space for that, and the existing building could certainly come down and come back with parking or some sort of adaptive reuse of that building. So in the recommendation of those 4 options, we were recommending moving ahead with a renovation of the 4-5 center in addition to a 10-year plan of some advancements at the other elementary schools as well. A few fixes here and there, and a few summer projects to create some learning support spaces and just kind of rehab a school like Hereford that just may need a little bit of an interior facelift in some spots.
A lot of spots.
So pausing there, we kind of gave you a whole bunch of stuff about the existing buildings last time. Here's a couple of options. Again, I'm sure there's many, many more. These seem to be pretty straightforward and kind of easily digested. Any other options to think about? Anything that you guys have thought, hey, wouldn't it be neat if we did this?
No, my only question at this point is with all of your reviews and recommendations, like I know at the 4-5 center, we currently have, what, one elevator for handicapped, disabled. We've taken all the ADA compliancy into consideration and things like that, and we would do all the necessary upgrades to accommodate our special needs children if whatever we do in any of the buildings.
Yeah, I mean, you need to have those. You built the ramp out in front of the space. You need to have the elevator to link those two floors. So you've done several things there. Again, there's been money put into that building. Between the three, it needs more work, but it's not
Horrible.
it's not in terrible shape by any means. So, and again, as I mentioned, having more space than you need is not a terrible thing. There's some areas that you can even rent out or repurpose. So
Or tear
there's
down?
Well, right now, the most cost-effective option would probably be, number one, renovate the existing 4-5 center.
renovations are always easier than when you build something new. You got to build all of it. You can't build half of it. So renovations and things like that over time allow you in all three of those buildings to take renovate as you want to go. What's the highest thing that's needed? So there'll be recommendations that go to Doug that says, hey, the boilers here are a little bit higher need than something else. So while we're providing boilers and things at Marlboro or some additional equipment, the electrical equipment at Hereford, that could be smaller summer projects, or hey, maybe that's something that rolls into renovation of the interiors. Hereford's a great example of all of those classrooms around the perimeter are fine. You take out a couple of areas here and there, and then new lighting, new carpet, new paint. Just all of a sudden it'll look
It looks like a
brand
new
new.
building.
You're like, whoa, wait a second, this is the same building we had before. So that's a great example. And so there's a lot of little things along the way. You do lighting one year and carpet the next one, or you have a kind of a little mini project where a little bit more is done over time, and you have a little bit of a bigger splash to go along with all the Doug things that
Yep.
aren't
That also need to be
not
done.
important. Heating, cooling, the water running, those are all very important things as well. So that list and those priorities of things that need to be fixed just to maintain sometimes will drive that, but also that idea of establishing these learning centers, growing the flight program, things like that. Those are themed projects that sometimes work very well because they are improving academics.
Always important.
Yeah, again, that's what we said, that was the very first slide. It's a school, by the way,
Yeah.
and it's also a building that needs to be in good shape, so.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah, I was just going to say.
So when you were looking at the different options, I'm just curious, did your firm ever consider the option, since you've been talking a lot about there being excess space in the 4-5, and I know the high school needs a lot of work. Was there any consideration given to renovating the 4-5 to accommodate 6th and moving 9th down to the middle school to free up space at the high school? Because many high schools are 10 through 12. So I was just curious if that was ever an option that you guys discussed, and if not, what the reasons might have been. Because I know when you get to the high school, I hope I'm going to see a lot of recommendations,
Yes.
because I believe there's a lot that needs to be done at the high school.
Right.
So I was just wondering if that was a thought that was ever even entertained.
I think that's something we can look at, just on a numbers game, like is there enough room to just kind of slide the grade down?
Well, like I said, I would think you'd have to probably move 6th down to the 4-5 center. We'd have to change the name.
Well, then
Another
we'll almost turn the
contest?
middle
No.
school into a legit junior high building.
So yeah, I mean, it was just a thought that occurred to me, because my previous high school has done that. They moved their 9th grade to the middle, but we refer to it in West Virginia as junior high. when she used the, and so junior high is 7th, 8th, and 9th, and the elementaries go K to 6.
Yeah,
So I was just curious.
Districts all over the state, certainly all over the country, that have grade alignments that are all different. So there's no, it's this and only
Right.
this. Most of the, just kind of like we said, you can't just take 4th and 5th and throw it back into the elementary. While there is room, an entire grade takes up a lot of room.
Okay, so no, there's not that much extra
There's
room.
not that much space.
That's
why
the answer,
it's
thank you.
utilized. But it is a good idea to look at and kind of consider as well, so we can show that as another option.
Nope, if
Hey,
there's not
this
enough
can-
space for another grade, then that's a good answer. You've already looked at that and felt that, no, 3 grades are probably not best to be accommodated.
Any of the grade shifting like that or closing of a building requires expansion someplace else. So if that, if 6th grade was moving back in, that really wouldn't fit as in the 4-5. Then you expand that and have K6s, and then it can get a little messy. So we can run some numbers and things, but that I think would be a similar conclusion as trying to grab 4th grade and throwing them back into the elementary schools too.
Nope, makes total sense.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
If you made 3 elementary schools up to 5th grade or whatever, the 6th grade, did anybody look at the cost? Would there be a cost savings in transportation and administration and personnel in these buildings that you eventually could recover some money? And also, has this piece of property ever been, the middle school, the old middle school, has that ever been appraised?
No.
I don't know about the appraisal part. That's
No.
not something that we would do. If you have a building open, you have a principal and a nurse and administrative staff. So moving grades around, you still have administration at each school. Transportation was something we did bring up when we talked about everybody going to 3 K5s. Does that create an easement of having one building that's a 4-5? You may have a bus that's passing each other going to the 4-5 versus going to one of the elementary schools. So that would take some time and things to talk about with transportation, but that could be a potential advantage. It's still the same amount of kids. So while I would think the K5 certainly wouldn't cost more, it may not be the reason to do it. You save one bus, which is a savings, but it's not going to be hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars in transportation costs. Because again, you still have the same amount of kids. Oftentimes,
Redistricting is never a popular thing either.
what's that?
I said, and redistricting is never a popular thing.
That's never a
As long as you're grandfather for life.
Right.
It's okay.
I think the idea of showing that, and we had said that in some of our other meetings, was it's not so much a suggestion as it kind of reinforces the need for that building. And any work that you put into it, if somebody 10 years down the line said, hey, let's go back to the K-5 now, hey, that's great, you can move right in tomorrow. You still have those facilities available. So it provides that, it shows that the building is adaptable to even other suggestions that we might even be having today.
Any other audience have any questions, suggestions, thoughts? Okay. All right.
Let's rip the Band-Aid off.
Yeah,
So
let's
let's-
rip the high school Band-Aid off.
What's that?
Yikes.
The middle school option here was, again, a very good building. Built in 19, it was, again, like a lot of schools, grand opening, grand closing, unfortunately, right away. So everything that we had kind of talked about in there was, in our report part, was in very good shape. The high school, built in the 60s, and again, like a lot of Pennsylvania schools, kind of added over and over and over and over again. Capacity there at 83, so what that's showing, to your point, is you're right where you want to be. So there's really not a lot of additional space anywhere. Every room in this facility is occupied. And there's several things that were addressed to us that were simply too small. So we said, while the building's maintained, a lot of the finishes are dated. Kind of a similar comment to Hereford. The security vestibule was added here, which was great, and as a front door, that's where you would need that. The challenge is the admin is still down the hall, up a flight of stairs. So the fact that it's disconnected, there's really no easy way to fix that. And so you still have, while your security improved by allowing someone to be checked before they come in, they're still coming directly into the school before heading to the nurse or heading up to administration. The auditorium is dated, the cafeteria is too small, classroom casework is kind of falling apart in some areas. There's a lot of masonry failures around the outside of the buildings, predominantly at where you have what we would call landscape walls, like these little guys kind of firing up. So the masonry that's actually on the building where people are behind is in better shape. So it's kind of those fins and things that are kind of falling off. Nurses' suite's a little too small. We talked about some dehumidification issues based on interior parts of the building. Again, kind of pointing out a few things here. We're looking at doorknobs that aren't ADA compliant. Vision that's blocked into the classroom, because those are, it's very easy for someone to be able to break through that. So sometimes teachers will put drapes or something behind that. That's actually a security concern the other way. You want to have visibility into classrooms so that principals and administrators and police can walk by and make sure everything's okay. So what you want to do is be able to lock down those classrooms and not allow somebody to break the glass and get in, but you should be able to have visibility into classrooms. So there's a couple of things there security-wise. They have basically louvers at the bottom there that, one, are not necessarily secure, but what they're doing there is they're kind of just pumping air conditioning in some cases from window units, and hoping that it kind of makes its way through the classroom, underneath the door, and out into the corridor. So that's not really a code-compliant way of dealing with indoor air quality. And several spaces in the school that have kind of exposed outlets in the floor, asbestos floor tile in some of the classrooms as well. So again, an older building, a few more things to work on there. You're starting to see some of the reasons the score of the interiors part was up. Science labs were small, spaces not necessarily conducive for again, that kind of modern education, especially in a secondary school. Special education, independent learning spaces wanted to be added for life skills and things like that. You had some of that program in the primary, and some of that wasn't being provided as much in the high school building. Corridors are, your old 70s corridors, kind of cold hallways. There was a desire educationally to try to maybe separate some of the ninth graders from the high school. Everybody right now is just kind of jumped right into the middle. If there was a way to create some grade level areas, similar to what we were showing at the elementary schools, that could be something that was positive as well. We talked about the music program growing but too small, athletic spaces that are just dated and needs of some repair as well. The gym floor in your main gym is in good condition. We were there, it was sanded this past summer, and they said this is it, this is the last time. You sand it again, you'll be looking down in dirt. So there's some work there to kind of modernize and sprucing up the place a bit. So again, on the infrastructure side, there's HVAC issues, there's plumbing fixtures and ADA compliance, sprinklers, public address system was probably the one that we would highlight the most in that list of infrastructure needs. The ability for anyone, anywhere to make an announcement in the building is critical. Lockdowns, things like that, that's very important. So that's one of those, what you would think of as a small comment that's, kind of rises to the top just because of its level of importance. Upgrades, educationally, as I said, some of the interiors are a bit dated. The library is huge, but really underutilized, and then some of the science labs are a little small. So learning centers in the secondary area. So here again, you can imagine this was, this is actually a new building. But you can imagine if this was a room or a classroom and they just took the walls out. These spaces are enormously popular with high school students during lunch, before school, after school. I could be the teacher of the classroom here and say, all right, you three, why don't you go outside, work that project out, come back in 15 minutes. That's the type of learning environments that secondary teachers are providing their students. You see them sitting out in your hallways now, backs up against the lockers, feet out in the middle of the hallway. So they're kind of doing it, it's just not in a very good, conducive space. So these types of spaces are great and really nice. So opportunities, again, there's not a lot of extra space here like we had in the elementary schools. So the first thought was to potentially build a new face across the front of the school. We've done this in a couple projects, one that's very close by, Central Bucks East High School. Just tore off the front, added a whole new front to the building. It looks brand new. Behind it is a 60-year-old Pennsylvania, built additions over time high school, but the front of that now has all new security, all new admin spaces. Science labs were rebuilt. Older science labs were repurposed for math and English and social studies, because that's fine. It just provides that new look to the school. We're not doing these things just for aesthetics. There's a lot of function to that, but having that brand new front door is something to think about. So what we would suggest here is you take that upper level. Again, remember this school is kind of at a 2-story school with a middle, and then the 400 wing in the back is on 3 floors.
It's confusing.
All right, so it's a little bit up to go down, but again, additions and additions and additions. It's every school in Pennsylvania. But what would be interesting is you take that admin space and nurse space, which we already said is a little too small, and turn that into kind of the heart, the center, the student commons of the building. I'll show you an example of that in a minute. You take the guidance area here. This could become one of your new science labs. Maybe something that's a little glassy that shows off. Maybe that's kind of senior physics that are doing some really cool experiments and things like that in the space. Then we can expand, as part of the addition, some additional science labs. Maybe those are chemistry or earth science that want to be bigger. Maybe it wants to have a greenhouse associated to it. Spaces that need a little bit more height and a little bit more space. So most of your other science labs stay where they are, but we may move out, the physics and chemistry and things like that that are in spaces that are just too small. They go to the bigger ones, and you repurpose an old physics space into biology. Not that big of a difference. Maybe it's just some desks and things, but gas, water, plumbing, storage, all of those things are already there, so that can work out pretty well. Additional classrooms, because we are going to start taking a few classrooms away for some interior ideas. Then you move administration to the lower level. So the administration would be at the same level as the auditorium. You'd have that secure entrance for anybody parking out here. We stayed within the curb line, which kind of took all those little skateboard fins away. But you're still walking directly into the school. You're on grade to this area here. Provide a stair and an elevator that would sit here that would bring you up to and down to this the 2-story area of the school. So this really here becomes that main lobby. We can expand your music program as well. Maybe do that in this one, I guess. The thought here would be that band would take over that whole space back here, and then chorus and your additional music space could take over some classrooms in the front. So it's all utilized. It's all spaces that needed to expand and provides that secure area in the front. Those 3 classrooms are starting to replace maybe some other areas that we start to take apart, like the learning spaces in the elementary schools. The library here, all this area back here is like the workroom and things like that. We thought, we'll just flip it around a little bit and open this space up and then allow the library, because we still have libraries in schools, to kind of sit behind that. So that, this kind of as a learning space here, opening up the library there, maybe just one classroom space here, just doing that in some targeted areas. It's a brand new school where really that's all we touched. Most of that plan is white, so we didn't move any of the walls anywhere else. It's just kind of targeted areas and an addition across the front. We talk about a student commons area. This is Interborough High School down near the airport in Philly. This was an area where we actually took out a chunk of the floor to link the 2 floors, the first and second floor of the building. These are existing windows that are in their library now. We moved the library down to the first floor and just opened it up with what we call a learning stair. It's basically a stair with some bleachers along the side for kids to kind of pull over, sit, collaborate together. There's charging stations and all of those things. So if you came in this school here and looked to the right, that's the concept, is that you'd be able to go up to that other level, down to the lower level on the other side, and now all of a sudden it doesn't feel like, how do I get from one spot to the other? There's a little bit of a common lobby of all that. It's much more open space. It's right at the front door where admin is, so there's a better security link to that. And again, we've kind of got a brand new modern high school without knocking it down and starting over. On the lower level, so on the, this would be a 2-story addition, and on the lower level, we're just kind of expanding some of those classrooms and labs. These would be great spots as well for that life skills and students with special disability needs and things. It would be larger spaces, a little bit more accommodating, and again, along the exterior, so it's a little bit easier as they're coming in for van access or anything like that. And then taking kind of the old TV studio, which could certainly move as well, and creating a bit of a student commons at that end of the building. What's nice over there is it's right next to the cafeteria. So instead of, you've already expanded the cafeteria once, instead of building out again, just take this space and repurpose that into a student commons. So you've got the cafeteria here. I can sit in the, we'll call it traditional cafeteria, or come right outside here for some seating, tables and chairs. You kind of saw that in the, I think the pictures we took when we visited that other school was during lunch. So those kids were all out there eating their lunch as well. So again, targeted areas for some learning ideas and an addition across the front. So here we're going to break down some costs. So if you look at building renovations and new construction, so as I said before, when it talks about new construction, that's, you kind of have to do everything because it's a building. You can't just build a structure, that wouldn't make any sense. The renovations is where we can go all the way through the building, and we could just kind of stop at the front. We've done projects where we did the front of the school and all of the corridors and didn't go into classrooms. That's where the money right now. We'll do that, 5 years, 10 years from now. So when you get into renovation options, there can certainly be a range. We thought this was a decent range to show at about $30 million of construction, $40 million of total projects. So we're including $600,000 in furniture. Maybe we don't need to spend that much. Maybe we want to redo all the furniture in the school, whether the classrooms are being redone or not. So that number could go up and down. So this has a range. Made some sense. It could certainly get bigger or smaller. We kind of looked at, it could be as large if you were renovating to a brand new level of everything, it'd be closer to 58 million. So if you wanted everything to look brand new again, that could go that high. And again, it could certainly be 40 or less as that goes down. This is starting to be a much larger project. You can see again, that new addition, not to say only, but the addition part of that is 11. Everything else is, so it's a third of that project. Everything else behind it are things we can adjust. We're putting in quite a lot of money for sprinkler piping, plumbing is a big number. The mechanical number at $10 a square foot is way low. That's because you just spent a lot of money on the Giza thing. So the mechanical stuff there is much smaller as a portion to what it would be if you hadn't done all of those other things. You can see areas where we may say, all right, we're going to do 30,000 square feet of very heavy renovation. That's that student commons area where we're knocking down walls. Other areas that may be lighter, where we're just going to go and do, the corridors of the hallways. Maybe we go in and just abate the classroom flooring and put in new flooring. So lighter stuff like that. So it does give you the ability to raise and lower and choose as your budget sees fit. I think we talked about this a little bit last time with the athletic field analysis, and I'll try to kind of end here with, again, you're kind of at the confluence of 3 different municipalities. All of these fields, our thought was, again, This was talking about, a huge complex of 16 fields and, a tiny little area for bathrooms. So the infrastructure here is in great position for the potential of 2 field houses, kind of one on either end, kind of an east side, west side of all of your fields. You do have a lot of fields over here, obviously varsity softball on 11, varsity baseball on 7. So between, the main stadium and your other turf field, you already have this pathway that comes down, the concession stand that's here, ticketing that's there. We were showing, the fence is already there. There's those tiny little toilets. If you stay along the path and have a field house that sits there, I think last time we talked as well, the field house could be further up the hill. Having a field house in this general area makes a lot of sense to provide, I think I saw that, public restrooms, student lockers, and storage. Rather than having little, storage compartments that you buy at Home Depot kind of all over the place. Having a space like that is nice. And then again, you have enough fields, and for some parity as well, to provide another one on this side for all of these practice fields, as well as varsity softball, maybe a little smaller, but still in a kind of a perfect position. The parking's already there. You could add a sidewalk here. You could add a sidewalk here that links to the path that comes from the middle school. So now I've got parking here. I come through the path. I'm right across here. Now we've kind of linked all of this as kind of a master plan of the high school field. When we talk a little bit about the existing space that was purchased by the school district here, one of the thoughts was extending a road out to Main Street. Kind of looking at that preliminarily with some traffic consultation, the thought was that could work as a right in and right out, meaning there wouldn't be any left. Left is hard because you're crossing traffic. Left typically means you need a traffic light. And being a state road, PennDOT may have a few things to say about that. So one thought that may be a little easier, and maybe that would allow you to alleviate the need for the emergency use there onto 8th Street, was to possibly extend that out. That would work well with an addition at the front of the school. Again, you could have a little bit of expand visitor parking there. We could still have our bus parking out in front, a little bit of a pathway, and have some trees, so we can create a little bit new of a landscape out here, as well as visitor parking. And you can still have staff and kid parking in the back. And what this would do as well is allow you to deny traffic of going around the back of the building. Again, for security issues, it would be nice to be able to prevent that. So to have a little bit more access up front, parking lot 1, parking lot 2, you pick who goes where. This seemed to be a little bit of an easier way to kind of maintain traffic there. And then you do have a lot of space out in front for sports fields, a little bit of grading, and that could be soccer, that could be baseball. We talked at the 4-5 Center that there's middle school sports there. Certainly being able to bring some additional sports fields to this site would be nice as well. So the recommendations here is really all of these things. The field house, consider the right in and right out, and then again, kind of master planning, maybe some additional fields in the future, so that some of those middle school sports don't have to go to the 4-5 Center.
Yikes.
So ending with enrollment, the quick version of this is you went down a little in the past, you're coming back. So you had a 2% decrease over the last 10 years. You're about to have a 2% increase over the next 5 to a 5% increase over 10 years. So in a sense, what was reduced is starting to come back. Some of that is based on some new housing. Some of that is turned on housing renewal of people turning over houses to younger families. So it's not that it's a huge increase of population to really change our minds of any of the other pieces that we were talking about. But it does show as well, it's also important to know that you're not decreasing.
32, 33. When I started in July of 19, it was 3374. That was the number of students.
Amazing.
3374.
So that was a little bit about, again, numbers kind of returning to pre-COVID amounts. which we've seen in a lot of school districts. Any of that loss that happened during COVID is, if you haven't seen it this year, most of that's coming back. Growth, as I said, home sales, birth rates, existing capacity can certainly accommodate 174 students, which essentially, 11 per grade. That's not, it shows that, again, having that little bit of extra space, planning at 85% capacity. So, if you've got 11 classes per grade, that's one kid per class. So, that allows that 22 to become 23. You're easily able to accommodate any addition over time. So this is the end. So the 10-year improvement plan, this was kind of just a quick priorities and some suggestions. The first is to establish an annual budget. These are things that a lot of school districts do because there are just things that need to be fixed every year. Between roofing and paving, Doug always is going to have summer projects. It's not just for fun. There's things that are important to be fixed. And so our list, the larger list of boring things, paving projects here and there, repairs, ADA compliance issues, those are all things that would easily fill those up. So kind of establishing the routine maintenance amount is a good start. Then you've got capital projects. Those are kind of the things above and beyond. We'll call them voluntary, but they are important, as we discussed. As I mentioned before, the first priority when we look at these schools, and certainly the top one for Marlborough, was replacing the exterior doors. Hereford as well, when we talk about exterior doors and card swipes there, just providing teachers the ability to get in and out through swipe cards. So again, that's a function issue, but it's also a security issue. And the 70s electrical switchgear. That's no small cost, by the way. That's something that is again 50 years on in need of repair. The 4-5 Center, we went over some easy things like the courtyard, but certainly some interior fix-ups like the Learning Commons is a good idea. There's some electrical upgrades there as well. The high school is where we start to get some larger ideas. Academic commons again, and upgrading interior finishes, and then beginning to plan for new additions. Those are projects that take a year or two to plan and 2 to 3 years to build. So those don't happen overnight. There's a lot of work involved in any of those, from design planning to financial planning. The high school campus as well, the field houses, the traffic management. As we talked last month about this building's in good shape. There's things to fix up, like we said, in anything. We talked about expanding storage, maybe creating some more offices, kind of back behind us there, and kind of just continued maintenance and HVAC upgrades here. So anything else you think should be added to a 10-year plan?
The only thing I didn't see on there for the high school was the roofing projects that I know we need to do.
Yes. So that
I didn't see that in the dollar amount. That's the only where I
we
can see it.
Doug had that as a separate report, all the roofing place. But that's a good idea. We should make sure that we include the cost of those things in any type of plan. That's a good point.
All right.
No, you have, because there's really 3 inputs, right? There's this study, the roofing study, and then we had 20-ish deferred ECMs from the Giza project that we costed out, but then deferred. So we have to blend all 3.
Oh, yeah. Anyone in the audience, questions, comments, heart attacks?
I think we saw some dollar amounts for some of the various projects. The only one that I didn't see up there would be like the cost of field houses and traffic improvements.
Yeah, again, field houses, it depends what's in them. Let's say each one is $1 million. If it's as much the building as it is the infrastructure to get things there. So the concession stand, I believe, has plumbing. So if you're running water to the one that's closest to the concession stand, that's great. Assuming we're not going to have showers and a weight room, the super luxury boxes or something like that. Again, some of these field houses can get pretty crazy. The one over by the JV field, we'd have to run water and power to it. So there may be, even if it's the same building, that one may cost a few dollars more because there's utilities that have to get to it. So we're doing, Lower Moreland right now is like a little over $1 million because they have to bring utilities to that. And that's just simple. It was actually that is a concession stand. Concession stand, toilets. Now for that stadium, you're going to need a lot more toilets there than because that's going to be based on occupancy. So that may be much larger because, again, you need a certain amount of toilets for every seat that's in there. But we can do that as well. Based on your seating count, we should know the toilet count, and then we can provide a number for that.
Is there a code for that? Is that actual
Yes.
code?
Yes?
That's what I figured. I figured there was,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's
Just
based
checking.
on seating.
Okay.
Then there's things like, you'd have to argue some things like non-simultaneous use, like you're not going to have the championship football game there and a baseball game and a softball game and a soccer game going on at the same time, where you'd be, building Lincoln Financial Field.
8,000 toilets, yeah, right.
But it can be a lot. We did one in Boyertown, and it's a lot, dozens and dozens and for potty parity, which is a code thing, there's a lot more women's fixtures than there are men's. So you might have 15 toilets in men's and 25 in the women's. It's like, that's a lot. But that may be code driven as well for, it seems like a lot until halftime, and then it's like everybody's waiting on. So yeah, the code will drive how many facilities you need.
We have UMJA at the middle school and the high school. Okay. Okay.
And again, locker
I feel
rooms as
better.
well. I mean, is that the football team may not go there. Because if you wanted that, then that's a much larger space. So if we have a locker room for, tennis and softball and track and things that aren't, large people with pads on, that's a smaller space. So basically people are arriving, they're changing their clothes, they're getting yelled at halftime, and then they go back out. If you came back and said, we need a weight room, we want this to be the locker room for the home football team with lockers for everybody and shower. Okay, well now we're building a much larger field house facility. Northampton Area School District. We built that as an addition onto the middle school, and it's huge. It's 6 locker rooms. It's right at the end of their field, but that's the home base for everybody. They don't have any other locker rooms in that area, so that's what they use. So they needed it to be, that large. Concession stand there is a full working kitchen. There's a lot more to that. So again, it can be.
And there's several garage doors, and when the garage door goes up, that's the home team's swag sale. I mean, all the parent stores sub in there, so that it's monsters. But it's all there. I mean, it's what you want to have, right?
Right. So your point, the challenge with that is it's expensive.
I just had to ask that question though,
Questions you
because,
could-
that's what I figured, $1 million for a building most likely, in addition to whatever infrastructure we have to
Yeah.
do.
Some awesome ideas.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, you're starting with a great infrastructure. These are not, oh my God issues. These are, continue your successful maintenance programs, and here's a few ideas to improve things along the way.
And I don't feel like any of the elementary learning spaces and I don't think any of that was too awful to palate. I think that makes sense. Do you know what I mean? As far as, the weighing the benefits versus the cost. No, I don't know what anyone else thinks, but I'm very impressed with what you've given us.
That's great. Thank you.
Yes,
It's
a lot of great information.
a lot, as I say, a lot of information.
Yep. Yep.
Well, that's
good.
good.
It's good.
Weigh you guys
We
down
need
for the
it.
next 10 years with all
Yeah.
kinds of ideas.
Yep, that's all right, but that's okay. That's okay, you have to have a vision somewhere. And it
Well,
has
we've got the
to,
basics to start working off of.
Yep.
So we've got the information.
And it's a complete outsider opinion No bias or anything like that.
You told us that we don't have to tear anything down and build anything immediately.
Thank you.
But,
Thank
no,
you.
that's,
Our residents, thank
those
you.
are important things to know, that there aren't any, immediate critical needs. Enrollment is, you're growing again, but you have the space for all those things. Obviously the middle school, that's perfectly fine, and I think as kind of everyone assumed, there's work to be done at the high school. But you have great rooms to start with, and something is, there could be little things that go on inside, ahead of something out in front. But even something as simple as just kind of a new facade and strip across the front, now all of a sudden it feels like a brand new building. And there's a lot of good examples of that we can share that, wow, that's a brand new high school. Well, no, it's not.
Yeah.
It's like 10% of a brand new high school.
Yeah, right.
Um,
Okay. Again, anyone, audience-wise? Anybody have any questions, comments, thoughts?
Just want to clarify, these are the these are the pros and cons and things, and basic recommendations. It's obviously administratively, and the board is just seeing it.
Yep.
So there's no,
Yeah,
there's no
it's not all
recommendation on the
me.
table for a new school. There's no,
No.
I know you know that, I just want to make sure that, very helpful and
Yep, it's
is that
just
good?
getting an idea, the
Right,
ideas
what are
together,
the next
and
steps?
working it with
You
the
don't want to see a
practices.
headline on the in the
Oh, no.
paper,
Okay.
Upper considers
Yeah.
$50 million.
Yeah, that's fine.
It doesn't matter what you say, it's going to be out there.
Yeah.
Because I'm
I know
mentioning
everyone here
that.
has it, But this is a part of planning, right? This is a part of being proactive,
Mhm.
what we
Exactly.
asked for and all that same
I
way.
mean, we did get some basic prices, a budget range of what it would cost. I mean, looking at the high school renovation could cost 44 for the existing, a full reno and expand, 58, partial, be 40, and some of these things he addressed on the slide there. So, 4-5 center could cost 38 million. Right. If we do everything in 1 year, I mean, that's, 100 million right there. So, Dan, come on, let's go.
I'll work on that. We probably should file for exceptions.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
That'll get us
We're
there.
having exceptions this time, yeah, right.
Yeah, it's important to know that, like I said, in renovations, you can pick and choose.
Mhm.
So you're spending as much and you can pull things back. We did one in Pleasant Valley a couple years ago, and it was corridors. We showed before and after images, the front of the school before and after images. And I always had one that was a before and after image. And that classroom was the same picture. I said, you're going to walk down this brand new hallway, you're going to open a brand new door, and you're going to go into the classroom the way it sits now. Because that's all the budget they had, that's where it was going to stop. And they understood that, and we were very upfront with the public of that, and the school board, and everyone knew kind of what we're doing and what we're not. And just kept that very
One of the
clear.
things you said earlier in the discussion, one of the examples you gave was like when you're renovating your house. You can do some things and it totally changes the perspective and layout of it, remove a wall or whatever. And that's an example I've used for years as what are we going to do? Do we have to build a new building or are we going to renovate? That's something that should always be considered.
Yeah.
I think that's what's helpful with the 4 or 5 option. You can build a new building. We don't think you have to.
Thank you.
So it's you've got, again, you're starting with some great bones, so that's
Thank you,
Well,
that's
that's a good
really
start.
important, and I feel better having that confirmed. Thank you. All right, that's the only thing on our list today.
That's all we need from you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, we shall to be continued.
Yes.
that's great. Thank you, Rob.
All right, Mike, thank you so much. Mark, thank you so much.
Do
Everyone,
you want
thank
to
you so much.
adjourn? Are you entertaining?
I'm
or do you want to talk
entertaining,
more?
it's up to you.
I think
Committee.
we've-
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, good. All in favor? Aye. All right. We're adjourning.
There we go.
Okay, we're adjourning. We're having heart attacks. Yeah, right.
No.
You know,